Of the weekly dose, challenge your perspective. This is Patrick Dare in Washington, D.C. The handshake that happened last Friday totally took everybody by surprise. Everybody's suffering a whiplash. What just happened? Everybody's left bewildered. How this could have happened? Was this in the plan all through? And what is going on behind the doors? The NRM people are wondering, where's the revolution? The NASA group that bore the NRM group is wondering whether the people's president was advised correctly, or if he took this unilateral decision, was this the correct decision? And what made him take this decision? You can't blame the people for wondering that because, again, there was not an explanation. The expectation was totally different from what the people's president, Raila Amollo Odinga, did by shaking Uhuru's hand and starting a dialogue. That's not what people expected. But we are here now, and that's how to be dealt with. Today, I want to say that this dialogue is something that is probably good for this country. But the dialogue has to have some very measurable outcomes, results that people have been looking for. What ails this nation of Kenya has to be addressed head-on in this dialogue. It cannot be business as usual, soft talk. It has to be tough talk. And I'm not saying that there should be the notion of my way or the highway. No. Dialogue means give and take and come to a solution. But there are certain things within this dialogue that just has to be immediately done and has to be clear. Now, I wrote in one of the groups, several groups in the U.S. that have been formed to help popularize Meguna, and the basis of it was the NRM movement. What the people's president has done is part of a fight. I wrote that there is a Luo saying, actually a Luo record, there was a Luo record sometime back that was labeled Be Mos Ka Pek, basically says that use caution, things may not seem to be what they are. And so I must ask the NASA people, the country, to go slow. Go slow. Things may not seem as what they are, because what has been the one thing that everybody says, oh, there's this betrayal. Our president, the people's president, has betrayed us. We need to have caution. I wrote that maneuvering the maze and intricate nuances of politics and the ever-changing landscape requires a steady and deliberate, thoughtful process. I do honestly believe that the people's president went through that. I further wrote that there's another Luo saying that Aora, iyoro, luth. Again, that translates to, when you're crossing a river, you have to use a stick as your guide before you cross that river. There are those rivers that are deep and silty, and you go in without knowing, you sink. There are those rivers that seem shallow, but they have sharp rocks. So you go in there, you could be swept away, and the rocks will definitely do a number on you. And then there are those rivers that look calm on the surface. and yet the deep and very fast-flowing undercurrents. And you have to use this stick to navigate. No, can I cross right here? Is this the best place to cross? The NASA people must ask themselves that the strategy before, was that the best strategy? Is there where we wanted to cross and have the revolution? And what I believe the president has done, the people's president has done, he tested the water, he put a stake in there, and he has determined that if I have my people cross through here, then there's catastrophe. And that cannot be on his head. He has to find a different way. He has to find how to cross the very same river, but at a different location. Now, those that are baying for blood, where revolution only means a fight, are those same people that will have you cross the river where you're going to be swept down the river. And you may not be able to be on the other side. And that revolution. We've seen revolutions where afterwards the country is broken into pieces. An emerging leader becomes even more ingrained in dictatorship. Just look north in Egypt. That's what happened. The Arab Spring. Egypt now has a much more dictatorial government than Mubarak ever was. So we have to trade carefully. We have to trade with a stick going forward. But within this dialogue, I'm saying that there has to be tangible results. And I just want to bring to you what I think those tangible results must be. First and foremost, I believe that those that put this country in this predicament must go. The IEBC people must go. And this body must be reconstituted so that whichever election comes next must be an election that is transparent, that everybody goes to the election knowing that the results will count. Whoever wins, the result has to count. And so this group that is at the IEBC, they must go. And I believe that the law must hold them into account. There needs to be prosecution of these people having put our country in a situation that we should not be. They were given a mandate to give our country an election that everybody could believe in, and they did not. Somebody died. Mr. Musando died because of this very same election. His killers must be brought to book. I want to say that for this dialogue to even start making sense, the official computer results must be released. If this government is going to act in good faith and accept that there are wrongs that happen in this country, and what has made us find ourselves in this situation? Yes, we know that Nasser has the results, but we need the official results released from the computers, from the KIMs. I believe that the DCI, Mr. George Kinoti, the Inspector General, Mr. Joseph Boynet, the Internal Security CS, Dr. Matiangi, and the Immigration Head, Mr. Kihalangwa, These people must be prosecuted. And I'm not saying that they're guilty. I profess law. But these people, whatever happened post the election, the violence against Kenyans, the shooting death of Kenyans, Baby Mpendo, these were results directly from these heads of these organizations or these bodies. The police is under Mr. Boynet. Mr. Boynet reports to the CS of Internal Security, Dr. Matiang'i. There is a chain of command that made it possible for the police to go to the streets with a live bullet and kill Kenyans demonstrating an action which is allowed within the Constitution. The DCI is directly responsible for the violence that happened in Kenya. Mr. Matiang'i is directly responsible for what happened to Kenyans. The immigration officer is directly responsible for the abuse of power, deporting a Kenyan, Mr. Miguna, to Canada, knowing very well that they are going against what the Constitution allows or what the Constitution says. A Kenyan natural born has every right to be in Kenya. The people that took him from one jail to another, denying him his rights, denying him clothing, denying him medication, denying food, must be brought to book. And all this fall within those 4 people. Mr. Mwaina Wanjigi's house was broken into the same way Mr. Miguna's house was broken into. Dr. Ndii was picked up from Mombasa and taken from prison to prison, his family not knowing where he was. These actions fell directly under these 4 people. They were the masterminds. They gave direct orders for these things to be done. Therefore, they must be brought to book. They infringed on individual Kenyans' rights. They disobeyed the orders from the courts about producing a Kenyan in court 5 times. And therefore, these people must face the law. The only way this dialogue will show that there are results and that we are going to a place where the revolution should take us, which means every Kenyan's safety is assured, big or small. Nobody is allowed, whatever powers they have, must be allowed to abuse another Kenyan's rights. It doesn't matter who they are. If they're breaking the law, prosecute them and let the law take its position. The next thing, I believe that Mr. Chebukati, and I think I've talked about this, Chebukati and the CEO, Mr. Chiloba, these two need to face prosecution. They need to come before the Kenyan people and explain to them what happened. I believe that those Kenyans that suffered brutality under the police must be compensated. That those that died, that was shot by the police, their families must be compensated. That those that were injured and incurred expenses in hospitals, they need to be compensated. The mother of baby Mpendo and the mother of the young boy in Kisumu who all he was doing was buying ice cream, they need to be compensated. I believe that the police force should be devolved and taken away from the hands of the executive Because with a powerful executive, that is how they can issue an order to have people be maimed and killed. The police force should be devolved to the county levels so that each county has its own police force and has its own police head. Yes, we probably still need the CS for internal security, who would coordinate things, but that person cannot remain to be Mr. Matiang'i. In fact, just for me to digress, today Mr. Matiang'i supposedly was supposed to speak here in Washington, D.C. on democracy. I'm wondering who made that suggestion. This is the last man that has any moral standing to talk about democracy and the rule of law after what he did to Kenyans. After he did this to Kenyans, somebody is inviting this man to talk about democracy and the law. I wonder who did that. Now, I believe that the only way that we move forward in this dialogue is to have an open and brutal discussion about things that have happened. And one of the other things, just before I forget, I believe that those that have been involved in graft in the country need to face the law. This country is almost in its knees economically. And yet, we've seen scandal after scandal. And these people walk the streets. They even vie for higher offices. They become governors. If we are serious about setting pace for the next generation, there has to be consequences to those who abuse power, regardless of who they are. And if the people's president and President Uhuru Kenyatta are serious about these talks, are serious about dialogue, if they're serious about moving this country forward, then these issues must come to the forefront. They must be tackled head on. And this comes to a point where I believe that there has to be a complete re-evaluation of appointments of positions in this country. Yes, Jubilee is the official government, but there's no denial that power belongs to the people. And real power really belongs to the people's president. The Jubilee government was installed. It was not elected. We cannot lose that fact in this dialogue. They were installed. Through intimidation of judges, through the IBC corruption, an election was done that should not have been done. And that the president has gone ahead and nominated people. There has to be a change in that. We cannot continue to have a Kenya where meetings can actually be held in one vernacular. Where when you read the names, it's the Kamaus, the Njoroges, the Wawerus, the Wanjikus. No. This body that has been appointed to look into things must look into those very detailed minutiae. Every department has to reflect what Kenya is. There are many educated Turkanos, Rendiles, the Mijikenders. There are many educated Luos, Luyas, the Mijikenders. There are many educated Maasais who are equally fit to run those offices. There are many educated Kambas. The people from Wajir. There are many educated Kenyans who are fit, can replace all these Corrales and Kiplagats and Kamaus, so that there is a notion that everybody in Kenya and every society in Kenya counts. We cannot continue to talk about dialogue, and yet the only people that run this country, which belongs to 42 tribes, is run from 2 tribes. This dialogue has to come up with real, tangible results. That's the bottom line. And that is my perspective. What's yours? This is Patrick Dyer in Washington, D.C. Thank you for listening.